I'm Caroline Hepker. You're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics, your bite-sized guide to the corridors of power. This general election, there's only one female leader on the ballot, the co-leader of the Green Party, of course. Yet increasingly, women are holding on to many of the key jobs in Westminster, from business secretary to deputy leader to shadow chancellor. So we're going to spend one day a week looking at some of the women who will shape Britain as a result of this general election. And this week, Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch is the subject for discussion. Currently, of course, favoured by bookmakers Paddy Power to be the next Conservative Party leader. She's known for her anti-woke stance. She's been an MP since 2017. She served as Equalities Minister and Minister for Local Government. Joining us now to discuss is our Associate Editor, Ailbhe, who got to analyse Kemi Badenoch in detail, of course, because she was here in the building at Bloomberg's European headquarters for a live TV and radio debate this week. It was between her and her shadow opposite number, Jonathan Reynolds. Ailbhe, welcome back. We've had such fun with this series looking at the women in Westminster. I'd love to start by talking to you about Kemi Badenoch. She was born in the UK to Nigerian parents. She grew up in Lagos and came back to the UK at 16. I guess we should start by talking about her early life a bit.
Yes, so as you say, she was born in the UK, but she didn't grow up in the UK. It was a thing that was quite common among Nigerian middle-class families to arrange to have to book a birth basically in the UK where they felt that the services would be better. So Kemi Badenoch's parents just booked in for her to be born in London. They spent a couple of weeks here after the birth and then went back to Nigeria. When Badenoch was in her early teens, they realised that that meant that she was entitled to British citizenship, that she was British, and she kind of lobbied her parents to return to the UK. So after, being born to two doctors, growing up in Nigeria, quite middle class, but then sort of their quality of life diminished a little bit when sort of political circumstances in Nigeria began to hit. She then at 16 decided that she would have better opportunities in the UK. She came over here on her own, enrolled herself at a college to get her A-levels, worked in a new look, and tried to forge a life here.
Yeah, absolutely. Then she became a banker. She also worked for the influential right-wing magazine The Spectator. I mean, just tell me about how she got into politics then.
Yes, so she talks about how she found the University of Sussex, where she studied something to do with computing. She found it insufferable, I think is the word that she uses. Right. She found all of her fellow students far too left-wing, and that she says that's kind of radicalised her. She joined the Conservative Party when she was 25, at a time when there weren't very many black people voting Conservative or supporting the Conservatives, and not terribly many black women. She would say that herself.
Yes.
But those were her values, and she worked, as you say, at The Spectator magazine, this sort of conservative-facing magazine at the very heart of Westminster, which I think sort of encouraged her interest in that even further.
No, absolutely. And the statistics also, even in the last Parliament, Kemi Badenoch was one of 23 Conservative MPs from minority ethnic backgrounds in the last Parliament. So as you say, not that many. In terms of also her entry into politics, I want to play you a little bit of her maiden speech. Have a listen to that.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm often inexplicably confused for a member of the Labour Party. I can't think why. I am a Conservative. To all intents and purposes, I'm a first-generation immigrant. Born in Wimbledon, yes, but I grew up in Nigeria. I chose to make the United Kingdom my home. Growing up in Nigeria, I saw real poverty. I experienced it. Living without electricity, doing my homework by candlelight because the state electricity board couldn't provide power. Fetching water from a borehole a mile away in heavy, rusty buckets because the nationalised water company couldn't get water out of the taps. Unlike many colleagues born since 1980, I was unlucky enough to live under socialist policies, It is not something I would wish on anyone, and that's just one of the reasons why I am a Conservative.
Yeah.
I believe that the state should provide social security, but it must also provide a means for people to lift themselves out of poverty.
So Kemi Badenoch's maiden speech then in the House of Commons. Very interesting. She's talking about her own background. Now, quite a meteoric rise. I mentioned a number of her ministerial posts and the fact that she's seen as a potential leader. I mean, she challenged, of course.
Yes, so after Boris Johnson was ousted, she threw her hat into the ring. As you say, she's had this rise, but really I think the thing that changed for Kemi Badenoch's career was when she decided to stand for leader after Boris Johnson was ousted. That's the sort of thing where she was never really expected to win, but by throwing your hat into the ring and getting a bit of a profile, you can kind of raise your prominence as a politician. She was backed by the very senior Conservative Michael Gove, who really sees her as the sort of next great hope for the Conservative Party. And she did pretty well and did raise her standing and has been in Liz Truss's and Rishi Sunak's cabinet off the back of that. So I suppose interesting to sort of briefly reflect on the kinds of policies and the brand that she pushed in that contest and afterwards. She's quite tough on gender, which we might talk a bit more about later. And she's also taken a kind of, you could call it an anti-woke approach on diversity issues. So growing up in Nigeria, being a black woman, she finds some of the racial politics in the UK very frustrating, she would say. She sort of doesn't see herself as a sort of victim, doesn't like some of the way that that's discussed. She's sort of taken umbrage against critical race theory, which we don't need to get into so much, but she's sort of made some of these social policies and taking a kind of conservative line on them a big part of her brand, with one eye, I think, on the Conservative membership, who will eventually have the final say on who could be the next Tory leader.
Yes, absolutely. And if you look at the Conservative Home website, she has been very well liked, according to their polling at least, which obviously is very focused on the membership. And now that issue around leadership, as Badenoch has said a number of times, is sort of inescapable for her. So I want to play you a little bit of the conversation that she had with Anna Edwards. It was a debate with her opposite number in Labour, of course. So here she is talking about leadership with Anna Edwards.
I'm already the Secretary of Business and Trade, and it's actually been the job of a lifetime. We need to focus on this election. The choice is going to be between us or between them.
Okay.
Be afraid if it is them, is all I would say. And we will talk about leadership things after an election.
So after an election, there you go. That was her response. Well used to getting the question then.
Yes, the question had to be put, for fairness, had to be put to both people in the debate, and then Kemi Badenoch made a joke right before that clip where she said, I think that question was intended for me, because no one, with the greatest respect, no one is thinking that Jonathan Reynolds is about to oust Keir Starmer as Labour leader. So yes, she knows that she is the front runner, essentially, by several metrics. She's certainly sort of the better's favourite to be the next Conservative leader if, as you would expect, Rishi Sunak has to step down after the election if his party faces a terrible defeat. So I think we're kind of expecting her to throw her hat into the ring. It's not guaranteed that she would actually win it, but you heard there, she's not even really pretending that she isn't going to go for that job when it happens.
What do we think a Kemi Badenoch leadership or Conservative Party would actually look like? OK, I know that Badenoch, put aside any questions of leadership until after this general election. And, that may obviously influence things depending on what the outcome is. But as you say, you've mentioned, her sort of, I suppose I'll call them social views on race, on diversity, on ethnicity. But what would an overall Conservative Party, what might that look like under Kemi Badenoch?
I think we had an interesting flavour of it yesterday in the Bloomberg debate when we hosted her here, because it was already like in that debate yesterday that they were in a position of opposition. Everyone was expecting Labour to form the next government, so the scrutiny was more on their policies, and she was very good at landing attacks on Labour. And I think you could see when she was here at Bloomberg that she's very comfortable in front of a business audience, and she was taking it back to some quite traditional conservative lines, I suppose, just sort of saying, you know, this is the party of entrepreneurship, this is the party of business,
yes.
You trust us with your money, and I think actually, you know, speaking to business leaders as they were leaving, they actually did think that she performed better, even though they are expecting Jonathan Reynolds to be the next business secretary. They were quite persuaded by her. So I think that she would probably return it to some of those arguments. It would be attack, attack, attack in opposition after a really bad defeat. The Conservatives won't immediately be in a position where they are ready to form the next government. So it would be sort of attacks on what Labour is doing. I think a closer relationship with the European Union is something that Labour is looking likely to pursue. Kemi Badenoch, I think, as Tory leader, would go after that very strongly. But also, I think we've seen in her previous cabinet positions, and you would imagine she would continue this as leader of the opposition, just sort of trying to bring these sort of more sort of divisive social issues to the top of the agenda, because she believes that her position is the side of the sort of the average member of the British public. Obviously Labour would disagree with that. She thinks that she's on the side of common sense and likes to bring issues around trans rights, gender identity, same-sex spaces to the top of the political agenda.
Yeah, I think it is very interesting, isn't it? It was a different forum, I think, the debate yesterday, in front of that business audience, sort of seated. It wasn't in front of podiums as we've seen other TV debates, for example. It was quite relaxed, and Kemi Badenoch was quite nimble, I would say, in how she addressed some of the questions, you know, between her and Jonathan Reynolds, and all overseen by Anna Edwards. Ailbhe, it's been so lovely to speak to you, and very interesting, really, to go dive a little bit deeper into the women who could shape British politics after the next after the next general election. Of course, just days away.
9 days to go, Caroline.
Yeah, absolutely, with bated breath, and we'll of course, have full coverage of the results for you. Ailbhe Ray, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Our associate editor there, doing a deep dive into Kemi Badenoch. That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe, give it 5 stars so that other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.